Today, dear viewer, I wanted to discuss something that isn't talked about very often. The early game of Dead by Daylight. That is, the first 90 seconds to 2 minutes of any match. This time is some of the most crucial in a trial and can define the rest of a trial depending on a number of factors. It's no secret to any experienced players out there that this time is typically very survivor-sided, and this is something many killers are aware of. The most recent list of pick rates released by Behaviour showed that for killers, both of the early game perks were in the top 10 for pick rates. I think that this, by itself, speaks volumes about how important the early game is and how some changes may be helpful in order to reduce the reliance on these perks and reduce the strength of survivors in those first few minutes. As always, I want to start by talking about the problems as I see them in order to give you, dear viewer, an idea of what I'm thinking about when proposing changes. The thing is, some problems are simply a nuisance, while others can be monumental. As a killer, I think there are two main problems. First, spawning in the middle of a map at the start of a match. In these instances, it can be really difficult to know where the survivors have spawned. You take a guess and one of two things can happen. Either you're correct and now have a nice early chase, or you're woefully wrong and now the survivors, who are all working on generators at this point, are given a massive head start. Sometimes this can lead to one or even several generators being finished without you even having a chance to stop them. Second, survivor spawns being random can lead to survivors starting the trial separately. As we know, splitting up on generators is the most time efficient way to complete the objective, and the survivor team can sometimes be handed this advantage on a silver platter. If this happens alongside the first chase taking even a slightly decent amount of time, anywhere between 2 and 3 generators could be finished. Brilliant. Now you have one hook, and the survivors are miles ahead in terms of objective. At this point, a killer who is focused on winning may start to resort to tactics such as camping and tunneling in order to try and claw back a victory, likely annoying the survivors who simply played the objective, and we all know that that can lead to some interesting endgame chats. As a survivor, there are also a number of problems. First, spawning in a poor part of the map can lead to really quick first chases. Sometimes, given that you spawned near the middle or in a relative dead zone, you're not too sure where the killer will be coming from. Some poor positioning later and you're giving the killer a free Scourge Hook pain resonance within the first 90 seconds of a trial. This can be, if nothing else, quite frustrating for you and your teammates. Second, the inability to give callouts as a solo queue player can be devastating. Being unable to know where your teammates are can lead to some awkward walking in on repairs moments. Or it can simply mean being unable to convey information such as, "Hey, I've seen that it's a ghost face, be mindful." These sorts of callouts can be especially important when facing stealth killers or those with setup phases. So, with all that in mind, what would I propose? Simply, I'd suggest a spawn zones system that makes the start of a match more consistent for both sides. I'll use the worked example in order to illustrate what I mean. Let's take Mount Ormond Resort as a simple example. Ormond, like every other map, would have 2 fixed spawn zones. These would always be the Ormond spawn zones every time you load into a trial on Ormond. Before loading into the match, a coin is flipped, and each side is allocated one of these spawning zones. Let's say, for example, in this trial, the killer is allocated Zone A, and the survivors are allocated Zone B. At this point, the killer is guaranteed to spawn within Zone A, but their exact spawn location is randomized within that zone. Likewise, the survivor group is guaranteed to spawn inside Zone B, but their exact placement is also random. Furthermore, as a survivor, you're guaranteed to spawn with all your teammates by default. In essence, the Shroud of Binding becomes base kit. This system, while simple, would make the start of trials far more consistent. As a killer, you'd know vaguely where the survivors are likely to be, leading to early chases without requiring the use of lethal pursuer. Further, survivors would need to take the time to split up if they wish to work on multiple generators at the start of a trial. For survivors, knowing the general direction that a killer will be coming from would allow survivors to position themselves in a good spot at the start of a trial. Further, given that you all start together, you're all far more likely to know where your teammates are and see the killer at the same time, reducing the necessity of callouts. Okay, Cameron, I hear you say that's great, but there are a bunch of offerings that alter spawns at the start of a trial. Your spawn zones concept would render these offerings even more useless than they currently are, which is tragically impressive. Well, dear viewer, you're absolutely correct. These offerings would either need to be retired or reworked for this spawn zones concept. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I love nothing more than declaring my loneliness. And then proving it. For survivors, there are 3 offerings currently available. These have been juggled around and reworked in order to fit with the spawn zone system. First is the Shroud of Partition. This offering allows a survivor to spawn separately from the group when used. They will still spawn in their allocated spawn zone, just not with the rest of the group. Next is the Shroud of Restoration. This offering will guarantee that the survivor group will spawn right next to a generator that's within their spawn zone. Finally, the Ego Shroud has been promoted to very rare and been reworked. Now, the offering allows a survivor to bypass the spawn zone system and instead spawn in the main building. This will put them closer to the killer at the start of a trial, but may also help with starting progress on the main building generator. For killers, there is currently only one offering, the Shroud of Separation. This add-on has been reworked into the Shroud of Foreboding. This offering means that the survivor group spawn will be guaranteed to be in the spawn zone that is closest to the basement. Another offering has also been created for the purpose of this rework. The Shroud of Forestall means that the survivor group is guaranteed to be allocated the spawn zone furthest from the main building. These offerings seek to play around with the spawning in a trial and confer each side certain simple advantages when they choose to use these offerings. That's it for this one. These are all the suggestions I have for improving the early game's current weaknesses as I see them. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment, send an email, make a forum post and send a link. Whatever your ideas are, I want to hear them. I don't make this video to declare my ideas as gospel or something, I just hope to maybe inspire some conversations. By discussing your ideas and putting them together, we can get that bit closer to making DBD the best version of itself. Thank you very much for watching, dear viewer, and I hope to see you in the next one.